I'm here to introduce Kira Meinzer, Vice President of Human Resources at PowerReviews. Kira's particular passion is fostering the kind of workplace atmosphere that is collaborative and innovative. Her human resources talents have landed the company she works for on multiple national best places to work lists. Before her current VP role at PowerReviews, she held senior positions at Dyson and C.H. Robinson worldwide. She's here to tell all of us today her experiences on building a Rockstar culture. Ladies and gentlemen, Kira Meinzer.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to try to watch time. So I have my phone with me. I'm going to set kind of a timer. I have twins at home, and we operate off of timers for everything. So if you have a toy and you're done with your toy, you get 2 minutes, and we give it up. So we're going to practice what I preach at home. So I am going to talk about culture and a little bit about PowerReviews. So we are an online ratings. I'm not used to standing still. We're an online ratings and review company. So when you go to purchase something, how many of you have never used a review to purchase something you saw online? Right, everyone's used a review. It's all of the data. It's how we get all information. So we are the software that is behind that. So if you go to Toys R Us, which I do frequently, and you read about any product on there, we're the software. So we help drive the conversion for all brands and retailers so that you, as a consumer, buy. So I'm going to focus on our culture. So when I started at the company 2.5 years ago, we had roughly around 35 employees, and now we're at around 150 employees. How many of you have ever heard of this term, culture eats strategy for breakfast? Yeah, Peter Drucker, there's a question if it was actually him or not. How do some of you define culture? Because everyone's going to define it differently. Anyone want to raise your hand?
The attitudes people bring to work.
The attitudes people bring to work. So that's great. Culture is a lot of different things to each company, and each company's culture is unique to them. Where strategy can change. Your board, as we just heard, is setting a lot of your strategy with your executive leaders. Culture is a really difficult thing to change very quickly. Strategy can be copied. We see that with a lot of different online retailers. We see what everyone's doing. Everyone wants to be the next Amazon, so everyone kind of drives towards that. Amazon's culture is very different than other online retailers. So I'm here to focus on culture because you can't attract the best talent, or rock stars as we're calling it here today, if you have a terrible place to work, right? So a couple key points. So we talked about, how many of you say, God, our most important asset are our people? Anyone say that during an interview? Of course. That's how you attract talent, right? But why early on do we not have anyone focused on our most important asset, besides the money, which we know the CEO is focused on, and finance? But rarely do you find an early stage company that actually has someone in HR that's really focused on that and making sure that we have the right culture to bring on the right talent. So my best advice to all of you sitting here is don't wait until you get to 70 or 80 employees where it's very difficult to change the culture, because it's like moving a ship. I've done it before at a company prior to this, and it was hard. The one thing I appreciate about PowerReviews is I sat down with our CEO. His name's Matt Moog. A lot of you may know him. He was really big in the Chicago startup community. He started Built in Chicago. He was a CEO in his early 30s. So he knows what he's doing. Right after we got funding, when these two companies merged together, which I'll talk about here in a minute, Matt and I sat down. They were looking for a head of talent. He was kind of looking for someone a little bit more junior, I think. And then as we started talking, and we started talking about what he wanted his company to be and what he wanted to build, he recognized how important it was to get that going really early. And what I appreciated about him is we were sitting down at breakfast, and he took a step back, and if it doesn't even know Matt out there, he's kind of a hard to read guy. You're never quite sure what you're getting. And so I wasn't sure, and he kind of took this step back, and he did one of these, which in an interview is usually never very good. And he said, you know what, I think I could use your energy. I know where I need to focus on the business, and I know I need great talent, and we need to create this great environment, but I'm not going to have all of the time to do that because my my goal is to grow this business, and I need to be in front of our clients, and that's where I need to be concentrating. And so I came on board about a month after the two companies merged together. So we had a company in Chicago that merged with a company in San Francisco. We had about 15 people in Chicago and about 30 people, maybe a little bit, 25 employees in San Francisco. So not only are we trying to build this culture, we're trying to merge this culture together. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit too, because it was tough, of how you combine Chicago with the Valley. So one thing you're going to notice on my slides, part of our culture at PowerReviews is we don't use a lot of words, we use a lot of images. And so when anyone gets up and does a presentation, it's a lot of pictures, and that's just part of how our culture is. So treat your employees like people first. So I did this really interesting exercise at a company that I worked at prior to this, and I divided the room in half, and I give each half of the room a piece of paper. So on this side of the room, I said, on this piece of paper, and they had no idea what this side of the room was saying, or what was on the paper, and I said, what's important to people? And what do you think that this side of the room responded with? I could tell you, what's important to me is my family, my kids, my house, safety, right? Values, how we operate together with my friends, and so forth. And then in this side of the room, I said, what's important to employees? And what do you think I got? Money. What else? Results. Feeling recognized. Benefits. A good desk. Good lighting. And it's a really interesting exercise because we think about our employees as employees first most of the time, is we're going to give them something really good to work on. We're going to give them all of these tools, but we forget that they're people first. And that's what's most important to all of us in the room, is you're thinking about your family when you go home at night. So how do we mesh those two together to create a great culture that believes in the person and recognizes the person while still being an employee? And it's a hard balance. When we start recognizing, I'm a working mom, and it's hard. It's really hard. I'm late today because one would not leave me alone. So as soon as you start getting rid of the stigma of what makes the best employee and what makes the best parent or the best person, and you mesh those two together, then we start to have a little bit more harmony. And I'm not going to get into work-life balance. I'm still trying to figure that one out. All right, so a really interesting exercise that we did when we had these two companies that started, we had these values. We didn't really socialize them very much, and they weren't these values. And so our employees kept asking for them, and they just felt very generic. And so we were about 4 or 5 months into the business, and Matt and I sat down and I said, we need to get some values, and we need to really socialize this with our employees and talk about it. He's like, I have values. And I'm like, you have values from your old company, and these two companies merged together, but is that what we see here today? So we had a really hard exercise in coming up with the values, and it shouldn't have just been me, and it shouldn't have just been the CEO. We involved the entire company. So we brought a group of people together and said, what do you see us operating as? What are the values that you see us living by every day that we haven't even socialized with you? And so we had a group of individuals that came up with a lot of different things, and Matt and I were going back and forth and had some really good discussions over if they were our pillars of culture or were they actually values. At one point, I think I said I give up. You decide. But it was a really great exercise. It actually took us a year to come up with something that we really believed in because we wanted to come up with examples of what we are actually doing. So these are the 5 values that we came up with. We actually just socialized them in November, I want to say, or in December with our company. But we felt very good about them because they're things that we practiced every day. And I'm going to talk about those throughout my presentation as to what creates our culture and how we live by these values, and actually how we were actually living by them without even knowing it. So accountability is one of ours. So how do you use data to make decisions? And on the people side of things, it's sometimes hard to do. So back in 2015, we partnered with a company, or it may have even been 2014. We partnered with a company called Culture IQ. Is anyone familiar with them? So they do employee feedback. So we do employee feedbacks. We try to get the best awards that are out there too. But this is something that we own the data on. And so it measures 10 different things from innovation, agility, work environment, to wellness, and so forth. So it's actually one of my KPIs for my department. It's actually one of Matt's KPIs too that we have for the company, is our Culture IQ score, which is made up of these 10 categories, plus our Employee Net Promoter Score. So I'm sure anyone that's in client success, or whatever you call it at your company, you're measuring your customer Net Promoter Score. We measure our Employee Net Promoter Score. So in order to get that, in order to come up with that number, everyone has to rate us as, would you recommend PowerReviews to a friend or a family member to work there? And you have to rate it an 8, 9, or 10. And then we subtract out anyone that rated it a 5 below, and it comes up with a number. So our goal was to obviously increase this. So we went from 46, and then we dipped to 37, and then we skyrocketed to 67. The benchmark is 17. So we're really excited that we're just crushing the benchmark. But something came along with that, and we had to use some of this data to make a really hard decision. So as I talked about earlier, we had 2 companies that we merged together. One was in Chicago, and one was in San Francisco. We're having a really tough time recruiting talent in San Francisco, and our headquarters was in Chicago, when we couldn't pay what they were paying in San Francisco. And we had employees that were starting to get disengaged who had been there for 5 to 10 years, actually. So we looked at the data when the study came out in May, and our Net Promoter Score in San Francisco was -50. It sucked. We've been watching this since we started this. It was back earlier in 2015. And we kept trying to do many things to increase it, but we couldn't keep the talent out there, and the more things we tried, nothing seemed to stick. So we came together as an executive team, and we decided that we were going to move the majority of the roles from San Francisco to Chicago. So in August of 16 of this year, we moved 16 roles from San Francisco to Chicago. We actually moved 3 or 4 employees as well. And it showed where all of a sudden our team started collaborating so much more together because we were in one environment. Our managers were managing people that were sitting right next to them, instead of managers from San Francisco managing Chicago, and a big disconnect. And then we had the time difference too. So it's not a decision that any HR person wants to just celebrate, but it was a decision that I think was best for our business. So give employees exposure to the senior leadership team. So transparency. What's really hard when you're starting at a new company or a startup company and there's 10 of you or there's 20 of you, you all have exposure to the senior leadership. At 150, what we hear is, God, I used to talk to Matt all the time. I used to talk to Todd. Well, now Todd manages 40 people. He can't talk to every employee every day, and neither can Matt. So we do something that's really interesting that's been a really good habit of ours. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Rockefeller habits. So we do a start, stop, continue. So our CEO sits down weekly, randomly, with a person on our team, and it's simply, what should we start doing? What should we stop doing? And what should we continue doing? So he does that weekly, as well as an executive team member does that weekly, and we've determined if we do it, we could get through at least each person twice throughout the year. So based off of that, we've gotten some great feedback to we should have coconut water. Just said thanks, I'll take note. To no meeting Wednesdays, which we just put in place in the beginning of January, and we're testing out to see how that goes. Collaborating. So we do a lot of things together. We try to bring all of our different groups together, from volunteer events where we actually do something annually. We give our employees, we break them into groups of 10 approximately. We give them $300 and about a week to plan. We say, go in the community and do something more than you could have with just $300. Find something interesting to do, whether it's raising more money or together as a team doing a volunteer event. This picture up here, which is really kind of hard to read, was just something I wanted to show because it's unique to our culture. After the election, we had a lot of people that were really upset We have 40% women, 35% minorities, excuse me. And so all of a sudden, this just felt like there was this, ugh, that was throughout the office and everyone else felt it. And one day, that same day, we walk into the women's restroom, and there are these notes all over the mirror, and it's like, you go girl, and like all of these words of encouragement. Here it says, little girls everywhere are counting on us gals are awesome, and someone just started that. And so I think what's unique to us is it's not me starting these things, it's our employees that are getting these things going. Learning is one of our core values. So we do 30, 60, 90-day plans. So before we even hire anyone, Megan, who is our head of recruiting, she says, where's your 30, 60, 90-day plan? How are you going to onboard this employee so they don't just fall into this black hole of new employees? Secondly, we do lunch and learns. So we bring all sorts of different topics in. The most exciting and most attended topic was actually taught by one of our employees. So we have a lot of our employees teach these lunch and learns, and he taught about pirates. We had probably over 80% turnout to learn about pirates. I didn't know so many people were interested in pirates, but use your employee for their strengths to teach other people. We just had someone teach a lesson about Excel. We have someone that's teaching about meditation and so forth. Oops. All right, so our last one is celebrating. So we do shout outs at our all hands as how do you recognize other employees. We do a lot of different events that aren't just for the brand new employees that are in their early 20s that want to tap the keg. How do we find other ways to share in the fun? What I think is unique about our sales team is that anytime that there is a win, they put it on our intranet and they thank every single person that was involved in the sale. From legal to finance to HR, we have to review the contract. They know it's not just them, and all of those names are shared. Additionally, we have great benefits. We have cold brew on tap. When the cold brew went out, it was a travesty. That will never happen again. We have flexible PTO, so we don't put a cap on time. We allow our employees to be adults and to get work done. And lastly, we just wrote a child care leave policy that gives caregivers, whether it's primary or non-primary caregiver, time off. Something that I struggled with as a mom of twins was sleep. So we actually wrote into our child care leave policy that everyone, if they choose to, has access to a sleep consultant within their first year, because sleep deprivation will kill you and your career.